Welcome to the deep dive. Forget surface level stuff. Today, we're really going to plunge straight into the intricate world of the Enneagram.
Yeah, that fascinating map of personality.
Exactly.
And to, really bring this alive, we're focusing on just one really compelling case study, Yuu Matsuura.
From Marmalade Boy. Much loved manga and anime.
That's the one.
Okay, so you might look at you and just see, like, the classic charming, cool, romantic lead, right?
Mm-hmm. Pretty standard on the surface.
But trust us, there's a whole lot more going on there. We're about to really get into the social 7 subtype of the Enneagram.
Sometimes called sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice. And we'll show how you, in his, well, seemingly contradictory ways, is actually a perfect example of this.
So just to set the scene, think about a typical type 7. What comes to mind?
Okay, typical 7. Bursting with energy, right? Super optimistic, always chasing fun new experiences.
And avoiding anything heavy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Sidestepping restrictions, keeping doors open, avoiding emotional pain at all costs.
Got it. So hold that image.
Okay.
Because the social 7 takes that and kind of twists it. It's subtle.
Right. So our mission today is to unravel those fascinating nuances, understand the why behind Yu's actions.
And shine a light on the deeper stuff, the motivations that might actually surprise people.
Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it. And the very first thing that really jumps out when you look at you through this Enneagram lens is this tension, this like inherent tension within the social 7.
Okay.
It's what we call a countertype.
Countertype, meaning like it looks the opposite.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It means those core 7 energies we just talked about, the fun-seeking, the avoidance of pain, they get expressed in a way that can look quite different, almost opposite on the outside.
Not the disguise.
Kind of. Think of it like maybe a fire burning inside a container that looks like something else. The 7 energy, that desire for possibility, it's definitely still there.
But the social part changes how it comes out.
Exactly. It shapes the expression,
Yep.
sometimes making it seem like something else entirely.
And you see that straight away with you, don't you? He has this vibe of being so calm, collected, almost like responsible.
Totally. It's not really the picture you painted of the typical exuberant 7.
No, not at all.
And that contradiction, that apparent difference, is absolutely key to getting the social 7. The core drives are there, but they're filtered, channeled through this social awareness.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit more. You mentioned sacrifice as another name for this type. What's driving that? What's the mechanism?
Well, deep down, social 7s have this really strong internal push. It's about setting aside their own wants, their own desires, what they see as like a greater good, or maybe just for the benefit of other people.
So they push down those typical 7 impulses. The fun-seeking, the focus on me.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They keep that stuff under wraps, yeah. Instead, they project this image of being selfless, responsible, even virtuous sometimes.
Okay, but is it purely selfless? You called it sacrifice.
Right. Well, the sacrifice isn't just pure altruism. It's more like a subtle shield.
A shield against what?
Against their own vulnerability, really.
Yeah.
By focusing so much on what others need, the social 7 can cleverly sidestep looking at their own potential for pain. It's like a maneuver to outrun that core 7 fear.
Which is?
The fear of deprivation, of missing out, of being trapped, of feeling pain.
Wow, okay. And we see this play out with you constantly, don't we? He's always putting Mickey's feeling, her needs, ahead of his own.
All the time. He's a supportive boyfriend, right?
Yeah.
Always there for her, helping her study, dealing with her very complicated family situation.
He definitely cultivates that dependable good guy image.
He does. He positions himself as the giver, the strong one, the provider, not someone who might, have needs or vulnerabilities himself.
But you said this sacrifice connects back to that fear of deprivation and pain. How does that work? It feels kind of backward.
It does seem paradoxical, yeah, but it's actually a really clever defense strategy.
How so?
Well, by always being the giver, by focusing so intensely on everyone else,
Uh-huh.
the social 7 can, maybe subconsciously, avoid confronting their own stuff, their own fears, their own potential pain.
It's like a buffer.
Exactly. It creates distance from their own inner world.
So by looking after Mickey, Yu doesn't have to deal with his own internal landscape.
That's a huge part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a way to manage that underlying anxiety, maintain control by being the strong, capable one.
Makes sense.
Now, another really, really defining thing for social 7s, and Mikey definitely feels this with you, is this pattern. It's called the seduction-withdrawal dynamic.
Oh, tell me about it. Makey is constantly trying to figure him out. One minute, he's so tender, giving her all this attention.
And the next,
He's distant, walls up. It's this endless push and pull, drives her crazy.
that inconsistency. Total hallmark of the social seven. They have this amazing charm, right? They're witty, engaging, they draw people in
Definitely.
and create these intense moments of connection. But, and this is the key, it's often on their terms. Very carefully managed.
Managed how? To avoid what?
To avoid any real exposure, real vulnerability.
So they pull you close, but then slam the door before it gets too real.
That's a good way to put it. When the relationship starts asking for more, deeper emotional honesty, real risk,
They bail.
they tend to pull back.
Yeah.
Withdrawal. And this goes right back to that core fear again.
Fear of abandonment.
Abandonment, yeah, and also the perceived danger of just
Yeah.
directly asking for what they want, of showing desire.
Why is that dangerous?
Well, there's this quote from one of the sources that really nails it. It says something like, "It is never a straight process. Choose the other without seeming to choose it. Desiring and the physical sensation of being rejected become contaminated,
Yeah.
making the expression of desire unacceptable because it puts the person at risk of pain."
Wow, okay, that just perfectly captures you with Mickey. The teasing, then the sudden tenderness, then bam, back to sarcasm or
Yeah.
just being aloof.
It's like he wants the connection, but he's
Yeah.
terrified of the potential cost, right? The potential pain.
Exactly. Okay, so let's shift gears a little. You mentioned another interesting thing, their relationship with authority.
Right. This is another layer of complexity.
How so? They seem agreeable, don't they? Like you with the whole parent swapping thing.
On the surface, yeah. They often present as quite compliant, even supportive of rules and, social norms.
Right.
But underneath that easygoing exterior, there can be this subtle rebellion brewing.
Hidden rebellion. That's fascinating because, yeah, he just seems to roll with the absolute chaos of his parents' divorce and remarriage, like, too easily.
Exactly. His almost effortless acceptance of that highly unconventional setup, you could read that as a subtle rebellion against, normal expectations.
Instead of kicking off, which wouldn't fit the good boy image.
Right. He adopts this kind of sophisticated, I'm above it all attitude of acceptance, which in its own quiet way challenges the norms.
Does that show up anywhere else? Like with school or friends? Not outright defiance, but...
Yeah, that's a great question. Think about his smarts. He's brilliant, right? Academically flies high.
Yeah, but he never makes a big deal of it. Almost downplays it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's another way it shows up. He achieves, but he refuses to be defined or, constrained by the label of star student. He keeps his freedom even while succeeding.
He gets the results without being trapped by the role? Okay, that totally clicks.
It's subtle, but it's there.
Okay, now, we know typical sevens often have, a million ideas and plans.
Always looking to the future, yeah.
But sometimes struggle to actually commit to one thing. How does that work for the social seven, for you?
Well, that basic seven tendency, living in future possibilities, avoiding firm commitments, it's definitely still there.
Because they're afraid of missing out, limiting options.
Exactly. That's the core fear of deprivation again. So for the social seven, it might look like reluctance to fully commit, say, in a relationship or to a big life decision, even while they seem to be moving towards it.
Like someone who fills every minute of their calendar because they hate missing out, even if they're exhausted.
That's a great analogy, yeah. That underlying fear of what if something better comes along is classic seven.
And we absolutely see that with you and Miki. He hesitates, keeps her guessing, keeps a bit of distance, even as things get serious.
Right. Even when he does commit, you often sense there's a part of him holding back, reserving some personal space and freedom.
It comes back to that fear that choosing one thing means losing everything else.
Every choice closes doors on other possibilities. That's a real source of anxiety for sevens.
Okay, let's talk about conflict. Another classic seven trait is avoiding pain and discomfort. But the social seven seems to be taking on responsibility, even sacrificing themselves. How do they handle conflict?
Well, their aversion to conflict is actually pretty strong.
Really? Why?
Because conflict threatens that carefully built image, right? The helpful, good, easygoing person. And it messes with the pleasant, light connections they like.
So what do they do instead of facing it?
They tend to smooth things over, use humor to deflect, or just withdraw, emotionally check out.
Okay, yeah, he does that all the time with Miki. Things get tense, and suddenly he cracks a joke or changes the subject or just goes quiet and distant.
I must be really confusing for her, like trying to nail jelly to a wall sometimes.
Totally. Like, who is he really, moment to moment?
Exactly. He uses that detached logic or that quick humor as a way to manage the tension and keep those raw, messy emotions safely tucked away.
It's about control again, avoiding vulnerability.
Always. Now, there was something else in the research, this idea of a narcissistic investment in social sevens. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, that sounds kind of loaded.
It does, but it's not about grandiosity in the usual sense. For social sevens, it means they have a really significant investment in an idealized self-image.
Okay.
But it's often hidden behind that apparent selflessness. They get this deep satisfaction, this validation from being seen as exceptionally good, helpful, even noble for sacrificing.
So it's more about needing that image of goodness to feel okay about themselves.
Exactly. That's a much better way to put it. That image is crucial to their self-worth.
So Yu's whole controlled, mature facade that feeds directly into this. He builds his identity around being the smart, collected, mature one.
Absolutely. And, thinking about it, we probably all know people who seem constantly focused on others' needs. Maybe there's a similar dynamic there.
Possibly. So his helpfulness isn't just nice, it reinforces that ideal image.
And like we said, protects him from his own vulnerabilities. If he's always the strong helper, he doesn't have to face his own needs or flaws.
Which also explains why criticism would feel like such a major threat.
Oh, definitely. It cuts right to the heart of that carefully built, idealized self.
Makes total sense. Okay, one last piece our sources mentioned was theatricality. That seems kind of counterintuitive for someone so focused on responsibility.
It might seem like it doesn't fit at first, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But social sevens often have this, natural flair, good comic timing, a bit dramatic sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And they use it strategically in social situations. Humor, maybe a bit of exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
It gets attention, but it also lets them keep control.
It's another way to connect without getting too close.
Precisely. Keeps things light, manages the emotional temperature.
So you constantly teasing Miki, those sometimes over-the-top reactions. That's part of it. Creating levity, but also keeping a bit of distance.
That's definitely one way it manifests, yeah.
Yeah.
It's entertaining, it engages, but it avoids raw intimacy. And thinking back to that planning without commitment idea,
Yeah.
it's fascinating how that seven fear of missing out just seems to amplify that tendency, having tons of ideas but struggling to land on one.
Oh, totally. We all know someone like that, right?
And this theatricality, it can also mean they're good at, adopting different personas, whatever fits the situation to help them connect but still feel safe.
Okay, so pulling it all together, you really is this fascinating paradox, isn't he?
Absolutely. He presents one way, calm, collected, responsible.
But underneath, he's driven by all those core 7 things. The desires, the fears.
Exactly. His responsible side, his tendency towards sacrifice, it's not random. It's a really sophisticated, deep-seated defense strategy.
Rooted in avoiding pain and limitation.
That's the core of it.
And of course, in Marmalade Boy, his story is really about hitting the limits of that strategy, isn't it?
It is. He's forced, eventually, to confront his own vulnerability, to actually own his needs, and to risk more emotionally with Miki.
Which makes him such a great character study, not just a flat romantic hero.
Way more nuanced.
Yeah.
A dynamic exploration of a really complex personality type.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, a proper deep dive into the social 7 Enneagram type using Yuu Matsuura.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
We really have. How that responsible surface can mask those 7 drives and fears, how sacrifice works as a defense.
That whole push-pull dynamic in relationships.
And that hidden rebellion, too. It's all interconnected.
It really is. And hopefully, listeners can now see you and maybe even people in their own lives with a bit more understanding.
Recognizing that those seemingly contradictory bits are actually part of a whole coherent personality.
Exactly.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Consider how understanding these complex types, even through fiction, gives us real insight into, just how complicated people are.
And maybe our own contradictions, too.
Yeah. Do you see any of these social 7 things in yourself or people you know? And if you do, what might be driving it underneath? Something to mull over.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.